Hey guys, Agent C here. Now, if you're anything like me, you were thrilled to see Laura make an appearance on episode 4 of 90 Days Self-Quarantine. But, and I really hate to break this to you, all is not as it seems. In fact,
it is illusion.
How do I know this? I'm glad you asked. Sit back and join me as we explore Laura's quarantine fraud. So to recap briefly, Laura's story is one of having her perfect paradise become her purgatory prison hell. She tells us she's been bumming in Ecuador for 6 months, and just before she was scheduled to return home, the human malware situation hit and her flight was canceled. Now the beaches are empty, the stores are closed, and the cops are keeping her inside after 2 p.m. She's trapped alone, with nobody but her dog and no way out. What is a budding sexagenarian to do? Lucky for her, and us, Justin Trudeau is here to save the day. We're reminded that Laura is from Canada and that old Justin has made some money available to bring Canadians home. And Laura is on the case. She layers on her Canadian accent, calls up the embassy, and gets that money. But when she goes to book her ticket for the last flight, as she tells us, all the seats are booked. Now she really is trapped and there's no hope of getting home. That's quite a compelling story, if any of it was real. There are 2 main problems with what she's telling us. The first has to do with what money she actually got, and the second has to do with where she was actually trying to go. Now, it's true that the Canadian government made a special loan program available to repatriate Canadian citizens with access to commercial air travel, but who lacked the funds to purchase a ticket. The process to get that loan is a lot like what we saw on the quarantine episode. Laura claims she needs this money because she lost the value of her original ticket. Her flight was canceled, and since she bought it on a, quote, third-party site, she can't get a refund. Now, I don't know what site she used, but it sounds like the sketchiest travel site on the internet. Typically, customers are given a credit for the value of their ticket when a flight is canceled, and change fees are waived when the cancellation was the airline's fault. I don't have any proof that she's lying, but what she's saying seems really out of sync with how most airlines operate, particularly in a time of crisis like we're seeing now. However, there's another problem. Laura claims she was trying to get a seat on a flight chartered by the Canadian government to bring its citizens home. This is because the government of Ecuador has closed all flights in and out of the country starting on March 14th. The type of flight that Laura is trying to get is known as a repatriation flight, or a repat flight as I typically call it. The process for getting a seat on one of these is not like what we were shown. On a repat flight, since the government is the one commissioning the flight, they are also the one who arranges for travelers to have seats on the plane. When someone takes a repat flight, they still have to sign a loan document with the government, but that money never sees their bank account. It's simply an amount that the person has to repay the government when they get home because they took a government-chartered flight. So, Laura is claiming to have received money to book a flight that the government doesn't provide money for and make arrangements for a flight for which the government takes care of arrangements themselves. I'm sorry guys, I'm not buying it. Now, this leads us to yet another problem. Where was Laura trying to go? Well, she kind of gives it away. We see from both her screen and from her talking on the phone with a travel agent.
Guayaquil to Miami? Yes, it's full, I'm sorry.
Oh, is there any other flights coming in at all?
No.
That she was trying to get from Guayaquil to Miami. Well, what's wrong with that? The problem is that these Canadian government flights are from Quito, which is Ecuador's capital, to Toronto, non-stop. The particular flight that we were looking at on her episode was operated by Eastern Airlines, and those flights were chartered in order to bring American citizens back home. I'd also like to point out that these flights are still ongoing. In fact, you can see the schedule if you go to their website right now. Meaning that when she says that she missed the very last opportunity to get back to Canada, she wasn't being entirely truthful with us. So it appears, at least from what we've seen on the show, that Canada wasn't really Laura's goal, and she was trying to get back to Florida, which is where she began her season on The Other Way. Now, we know from social media that Laura eventually left Ecuador, but it's not really clear where she is right now. All we've seen is her in some kind of a hotel room and out with a couple of other ladies. That doesn't really tell us anything one way or the other. Someone on her YouTube channel did ask if she was in Canada, and she replied by saying she was, quote, home. Whatever that means. So, let's draw this to a close. Based on the information we have, I think we can say with some reasonable confidence that Laura swindled the Canadian government out of money so she could purchase an air ticket back to the US. And she made up a sob story about it being the last flight out so she could engender some sympathy on social media, milk some money out of TLC, and generally stoke her ego by getting back into the spotlight. That, to me, sounds like some grade A fraud. Agent C out.